Hello viewers, SuperGT here. Welcome to the things that I think Forza 8 needs to get right. Quite a simple title. On a recent Forza monthly live stream, they spoke about the ways that they're going to go about making the next big motorsport game. Well, the next big game, they didn't really name what it was at all. And we're presuming that this is going to be a thing, presumably this year or next year. And normally the Forza Motorsport games come out every 2 years. So it should come out this year, technically, if it follows the same pattern, but it might be next year. It might be a little bit later. I have a sense that this one might come out a little bit later than before. They're also going to make it a lot more community driven. So they're going to listen and work on the things that the community wants a lot more. So I think it's important that you make your voices heard. And obviously let me know in the comments the things that you think the next game, the next motorsport game needs. Presumably Forza 8, what are the things it needs? So I'm going to go through a list here, in no particular order. We're going to start off with time-based gaps. Now this is something that I've always found a little bit weird about the Forza Motorsport series. The gaps from yourself to the player ahead to the player behind is measured in distance, in feet, in meters. And it's just a really strange way of doing it. It's really hard to measure how close or far you are from someone based on distance. Ideally it needs to be in time. It needs to be done in seconds. When you look at any motorsport in the world, they always do it in seconds. So that's something that they could change. I think that's quite an easy change, and it just makes it a little bit more motorsporty, if that's a word. If it's not, it is now. A better matchmaking system. So something that a lot of games do now is rank you based on a cleanliness rating, like sportsmanship rating, and like a rating on how good you are. Forza does have this in a sense with the leagues. That's purely based on ability, and that does make the racing a lot closer. That's a good example of how it can make the racing closer, but I think they could take it another level with the sportsmanship rating or how clean you are. And the main reason that they could improve upon this system is mainly just to give people a closer race. A lot of racing in Forza, especially in the let's say like a class hopper, sometimes the racing can be very spread. So the guy in first is winning by a long distance compared to the guy in 12th or 20th. The gaps can be too big sometimes because the matchmaking hasn't brought people together who are close on ability. So something along the lines of what Project Cars or Gran Turismo or iRacing doesn't have to be that serious, but just something that can make the racing a little bit closer by matchmaking you against people who are a lot more similar to you in ability and cleanliness. That will also have the effect of cleaning up the lobbies. If you're a clean racer, you're going to be separated away from the dirty racers. That's a good thing as well. More race cars. Now, Forza 7 was kind of a weird one on this because when the original trailer came out, I was a little bit disappointed straight away because the trailer showed a lot of GT cars, but they were all the same ones from Forza 6. So I saw them and thought, wow, okay, there's not really any new ones here. There were 3 at launch. There were 3 new GT cars, and they added a few more, like the Porsche. And there's a lot of GT cars out there which you could add. You know, the Ferrari 488, the Aston Martin Vantage. There's a long list of cars that they could add. And it's not just GT cars, like LMP1 cars, and there's lots of formulas they could add, and hopefully we can get sort of an updated list on a lot of the race cars because I feel like they were getting a little bit out of date. Another thing about the cars as well is just really the SUVs. You know, it was just getting a little bit stale having so many SUVs added as DLC, and the DLC was a little bit lackluster. It felt as though it was just 7 random cars. They never really had a theme or anything. I think lots of us were excited with that IMSA partnership, which didn't really transpire to too much. It would have been nice just to have, like recently we've had the IndyCar pack, part of the IndyCar month. That was a good update because it's specific and you're getting a lot of very specific cars. With the IMSA partnership, they could have added, 10 cars and 2 tracks or something along those lines, and that wasn't really ever a thing. On the subject of tracks, more tracks. In Forza 7, we had 2 returning tracks, so Suzuka and Mugello, and 1 new track, which was Dubai. We now have no other extra tracks beyond that. No DLC tracks, which was disappointing. So that's definitely something that Forza 8 could work upon. The track list. The track list is actually pretty good in Forza 7. It is a good track list, but let's just hope that they can add a few more at least. Maybe 3 or 4 new ones and maybe 3 or 4 fictional ones as well. It'd be nice just to have a little updated list, I think. Okay, next up, tyre compounds and fuel strategy and tyre degradation. So those 3 things kind of grouped into one. So the main thing here really is that I felt as though the racing on Forza games you could say it's a little bit one-dimensional in the sense that you get in your car and you simply just drive it as fast as possible for however many laps. There's no real tactical element, it's just drive as fast as you can. Fair enough. I mean, a lot of racing should be like that. Should be go as fast as you can. But to sort of mix it up a little bit, I just wish that there could be a little bit of an update to the tyre model, to the fuel model, and tyre compounds. Add some tyre compounds just to mix up the racing. So it would add a sort of tactical element to the racing. So maybe some sort of races where you have to come in for a pit stop and you have to use 2 different tyre compounds. So it's up to you to choose a softer compound at the start to get away. Just add another sort of tactical element to the game. And in terms of fuel, fuel never really gets factored into the game. It's normally a case of there's no fuel depletion at all. But when there is, it doesn't really change the dynamic of the car. The car doesn't go faster, even though it should when it gets lighter. So I feel as though fuel and tyres they're a massive part of motorsport, and it has motorsport in the name. It should kind of have these features in, I think. Next up, pit stops. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the fuel and the tyres. Again, relating to the trailer, we saw I think it was a car coming to the pits and there were mechanics working on the car, but then in the game that wasn't even a thing. There were no mechanics. There's no sort of interactive pit stop. You drive into the box and your car just gets lifted up and then you just drive out. There's nothing to it. So that could improve. They could have mechanics. Again, with the fuel and the tyres, you could be able to choose how much fuel you want to put in, change your tyre compound, that kind of thing. Qualifying. Now, again, another motorsport thing which has kind of been omitted from Forza. You can set up qualifying. You can do it in the lobby settings. It's possible. But it's not really a simple mode to set up, and single player doesn't have it. So this is something they could easily add into single player, maybe just like a one-shot qualifying to decide your grid slot. And that isn't really a thing in Forza. I don't think it'd be too hard just to add a simple qualifying mode, both for single player and for online. This would help, especially for people who are doing like leagues. You can just do a qualifying session and then just based on that, decided the grid. And next up, championship points. Now, this is something that they kind of touched upon in the single player Forza 7. So you had the series points function where you had to normally do like 6 races and you had to finish top to complete that part of the single player. But this wasn't carried over into the online. It would be a nice feature to have sort of multiple races. So you could enter a lobby and have 3 races where your score gets added up between the 3 and then the winner's decided from that, rather than just having one race, which are all separate. Okay, better replay angles and just replay functionality. When I'm trying to get a thumbnail and I'm looking at the replays, they just feel a bit weird. Like the cars are producing loads of smoke for some weird reason all the time. But the main thing is the camera angles. I think that it just needs a lot of work. It needs a lot of work. A lot of the angles are kind of too sort of focused on the car and not focused on the race. So they kind of zoom in on the car and all you can see is the car, but you can't see who's behind that car, who's about to overtake that guy, who's he about to overtake, who's he next to. You can't see that because they're just so zoomed in. So I think they could quite easily just look at what are real life motorsport cameras, what are the angles they use, and just kind of replicate that. I think that could be done quite easily. I mean, I don't program games, maybe it's really hard. And maybe just improve the HUD on replays. So I think Project Cars does this very well with sort of the data that's available on screen with the editor mode that they have and the broadcasting mode. But Forza can definitely improve upon what it's got, and it ought to, because it has its own interest with the Forza Racing Championship. So it's trying to broadcast its own racing, and to do that in a better way will just draw in more viewers. So it definitely makes sense for them to do it. Here's a good one. Improved slipstreaming. We spoke about how the racing can become one-dimensional, and the slipstream, or the lack of it, kind of adds to that. So a lot of the time, a lot of races settle down, especially in spec cars. When you're all in the same car, this happens a lot. You're all just kind of going around in a train, and no one can really do anything. Unless someone makes a mistake, no one is going to do any overtaking. And a large part of that is because slipstreaming is horribly underpowered. They need to up it. to really promote racing, promote overtaking. And I suppose a similar thing to this is the dirty lap function, which includes slipstream. And I think that this is a feature kind of similar to the distance gaps. This is something that it's been in the game, but it's been in Forza games, but it needs to be worked upon for the next one. Because I feel as though the system hasn't changed, but it's got problems. So something like you get slipstream by someone 100 meters behind and you get a dirty lap. So things like that, it's just a bit weird. I mean, that's weird in two ways, because one, you're the car in front, is probably, you're not really gaining out of that. Although there is actually a gain in real life from being the car in front, but you have to be a lot closer than 100 meters, I think. And on the second hand, slipstream doesn't work anyway, so it's not like it's not like you helped anyone, or not like you helped yourself. So it's weird in two ways. But the whole dirty lap function, I think, needs work. Maybe I think just scrap the whole dirty lap for slipstream idea. Just get rid of that, because slipstream is a part of racing. It shouldn't be a dirty lap just to be behind another car. I think that should be fine. For making contact, for hitting the wall, for going off the track, yeah, that's dirty. But for being slipstreamed, or for doing slipstream on someone else, that's in no way dirty. So it can be frustrating, because that can decide the grid for the next race. And sometimes you're about to cross the finish line with a clean lap, and then someone slipstreams you, and then you're going to start way further down because of that slipstream, which had no effect. But that's it for me. I think most of the things I've listed there are really just about making the game a little bit more motorsport focused. It doesn't have to go completely all in on motorsport. I understand that, because a lot of things that Forza does have going for it is that it's got a lot of variety and it's open to everyone. And maybe just making it really hardcore motorsport would put off a lot of people, and I completely get that. So they do have to be careful with how they go about it. But I think a lot of the things I've just listed could be very simple changes, which would just make the game a lot better for everyone. But again, let me know your thoughts. Do you agree with what I've said or disagree? And what other things could there be in the next game, Forza 8? What things could they add to make it a better game, a better series? I mean, there's probably a lot more things I could have added, but I think those are the main things that I'd like to get it down to. But thank you so much for watching. Hope you liked the video, and if you did, maybe consider subscribing if you haven't done that already, and hit the like button, only if you want to though. But thank you for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.